All right, we are live. Hello, friends, fellow colleagues, tech nerds, and CES attendees, whether you're virtual or in person. My name is Graeme Noseworthy. I'm part of the team here at IBM, and I'm in my big blue studio in my home office in Massachusetts. I am not in Las Vegas, and I am joined by my colleague, Jim Harris. Jim, how are you today? And where are you, Jim?
Great. I am here in Toronto, Canada, the Great White North, and I am not in Las Vegas either, Graeme.
I know we were supposed to be there, buddy. We were supposed to be hanging out, but alas, that was not the case. Now, folks, if you were joined us yesterday for the Twitter Space chat we did, we went through a lot of great topics, a lot of good stuff, and there's some stuff that we want to kind of dial in on today. But we know everybody's got limited time, so we're going to do a bit of what we'd like to call sort of speed tech, right? We're gonna a little bit of a speed round. We're going to go through a series of topics, and then if time permitting, we may even have a lightning round at the end. But today, I have the pleasure of being the interviewer and asking Jim some questions. Now, folks, if you don't know Jim and you don't follow Jim, you got to fix that because Jim Harris is a great source for the latest and greatest in tech news. So, Jim, our first topic, I'm going to ask you to give me 90 seconds. So I'm going to put it, we don't have a clock. We'll keep it kind of rough, but 90 seconds on the environment. And the environment, folks, is I mean, it's everywhere, right? We're all talking about it. For those of us, you may have watched the Don't Look Up movie on Netflix or watched a documentary recently. You may think about the car you drive or the things that you produce or how your company functions or why sustainability is key, right? These are the things we're talking about. But where does tech come into sustainability in the environment? Jim, 90 seconds on the clock. Let's hear what you got about the environment.
Graeme, this is so interesting. They say the personal is political. So I want to know with my coffee, I'm pretty passionate about coffee, but I
Mm,
want to know where my coffee came from. Was it actually sustainably grown without pesticide? Is it authentically from the region it is claimed to be from? And are the local farmers who grew it being fairly paid? So, I want sustainable, organic, fair trade coffee. And how do I verify this to be the case? Well, that's where blockchain comes in. And with blockchain, it is a transparent, immutable technology that allows me to trace back to the very bean the farmer grew. And, a technical term for this that people won't know is called provenance. So, how do I guarantee this chain of control through the supply chain so that when I sip my coffee in the morning, I know that it came from organic, fair trade a source. So this is counterintuitive, but the supply chain is a $60 trillion industry globally. And how do we know we're getting our authentic products?
yeah, yeah, and um, it's funny that you talk about coffee because when we think about the environment, like you don't normally think that. But the point here is that you want to think about environment not just at this sort of mega worldwide, oh my God, what is happening all over the planet? Kind of like when I was a kid, it was all about the hole in the ozone layer, right? And so now we need to be thinking about this at a much more macro level. And and
So
and, and IBM, yeah,
it's both levels. The slogan, think
it is.
globally, act locally. I'm thinking
There it is.
globally about coffee growing in Costa Rica, but I'm acting locally in my kitchen. So, how
Yeah.
do we tie that global thinking to my personal action? And blockchain can do that.
And so, folks, if you want to learn more about this, an example just like this, you can read the case study. You can see we've got it on the screen there. It's going to be shared in the comments on LinkedIn, and we'll share it in some other ways as well. But it really talks about how Farmer Connect accelerated their sustainability journey with blockchain by partnering with IBM. So, great story. Really kind of takes this from being this like, how does blockchain get mixed into my cream and sugar and the coffee here, and kind of makes it more it really helps to tell that story. So really great that if you read that, make sure you share it as well. Jim, we're going to go on to something that are terms I think a lot of us hear. I mean, even like my mom has heard of 5G, right? and but the edge and 5G, now these are things that we hear all the time. I mean, my phone all the time says I'm on 5G. But what does that mean? Or people talk about edge computing, and that one is definitely one I don't think my mom has probably heard of. But what does it mean, and why is it important? And how do I see edge and 5G in my life, not just as a consumer, but as a business? Jim, 90 seconds on edge and 5G.
So, Graham, this is really interesting. We used to call it the Internet of Things. So, all these little points of measurement can connect to the internet and be sensors and feed into a large data system where AI makes sense of it all. Now, in a factory, you can have thousands of points of presence, IoT, what we now call edge, and they are feeding in data continuously in real time. Now, we can get to one area called preventative maintenance. In other words, before the machine breaks down, it sends out a signal, hey, I'm beginning to vibrate more than normal. And rather than have it break down and the whole production line shut down, we repair it when we take a 5-minute break, rather than have it break down and end up being 3 hours, the line not working. So that's preventative maintenance. We also can use AI around quality control. So let's make sure, let's say the cars that come off the line, everything is just right. So we don't have to stop production and recall the last 1,000 cars we produced because something was wrong. So, and the 5G is the wireless connection that connects the point of presence, the IoT or edge, to the big data center. And then we have AI analytics working on it. So, this in a manufacturing setting is how edge, AI, and 5G all work together.
And there's so much complexity in these. If you just in that factory example, right? I mean, think about what it takes to build a vehicle, right? And not just the development and construction, but the delivery and the customer experience. There are so many points of data within from design to delivery in the life of a car. I mean, it's truly extraordinary. And it's funny how often we just kind of like hop in our vehicles and just the vehicle itself is an incredibly complex system, and we're like, oh, it just works, it's no big deal. But it is a big deal, right? I mean, these are really complex systems. So that's where the edge comes in. But tell me a little bit about 5G.
Well, 5G is the next wireless standard that is just beginning to roll out. We all have all our smartphones in North America, or predominantly, are 4G. But with 5G, we get infinitely faster speeds. So, in other words, rather than take hours to download a movie in 3 or 4G, you can download an HD movie in 3.6 seconds. So it's very fast. It's very accurate, meaning we can tell you exactly where you are using GPS. So it becomes important, for instance, in autonomous vehicles, vehicle to vehicle maintenance of distance. It's called V2X. So, I can sense in an autonomous car. 5G becomes very important for autonomous driving, for instance. And it also becomes important for you. This is bizarre, Graham. One of the most exciting applications is for the consumer. I can find my car in the multi-storing parking garage. 4G just says you're in this spot, but is it on the first level or the seventh level? But we get three-dimensionality out of 5G. So there are so many things. You can also put, 1,000 times more people on a 5G network than 4G. So we have faster bandwidth. We're going to have lower bandwidth costs, lower data costs over time. So there are many benefits to 5G, adding into the examples we've used.
So it's really important to look at 5G as not just like, oh, my cell phone or my tablet's running a little faster. It's really about maximizing the potential that is within these networks to really be able to enable businesses to innovate faster, to deliver faster, to function faster, right? And so, folks, if you want to read a story about that, we can talk about how Toyota has predicted better outcomes with their digital factories using Edge and 5G. So, once again, we'll be sure to put the link to that case study. Another great piece for you to read, learn, and share. But moving from Toyota, let's talk about Audi here in a minute, Jim, because one of the things that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago is this notion of sort of from development to delivery, right? And so customer experience is what delivery is all about. B2C, B2B, whatever it might be, customer experiences and engaging at some point with the person at the end of that sort of long chain of things that happen to get there is critical. So let's spend 90 seconds on experiences. Jim?
So, retailers would call this omni-channel experience. So, if I'm a customer, I might go to the website and look at a page or two of the material on a new car. I might go into a dealership. I might get a piece of mail in the snail mail that I fill out a survey and send back to get a coupon. There are all sorts of things that I will do. I might surf on my mobile, I might surf on my desktop. And how does an organization take all these touch points and roll them up into one and analyze the customer holistically? Similarly, inside an organization, there's a marketing department and they do certain things to market to customers. But there's a web team and they're completely separate, siloed somewhere else. And they have a whole different set of analytics and understanding of the customer. And then there are the product development people and they look at entirely different data sets. So how in an organization can I get a holistic, comprehensive understanding, not just of the customer, but how can we seamlessly work together to better develop, to better provide exceptional customer experiences? And, on Twitter, you'll see this as hashtag UX, user experience, or hashtag CX, customer experience. So how do we improve overall the customer or user experience by using technology both externally and internally in the organization?
So it's really, there's so many layers to all of this stuff, Jim. And I think that's where sometimes people, whether you're in the field or you're the consumer or whatever it may be, we sort of forget that there's all these layers, and behind each one of those layers, just like an onion, is just this enormous amount of data. And organizations need to make sense of this data, not just so that they can deliver a better product, but that so they can better understand who they're delivering it to. And Audi did a great job doing that. So, folks, another case study: IBM and Audi, and so how Audi delivered customer experiences that are really all about instilling trust. Because in the end, Jim, I think you would agree that the best foundation you can have in customer experiences is trust. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Trust is at the basis of all commerce. And if you give me or deliver a bad customer experience, I lose trust in the organization. So here's a powerful phrase: loyalty is the absence of a better value alternative. I remain loyal to a
That's great.
yeah, I remain loyal to a product or a company as long as it's the best overall. And that isn't
Yeah.
just the product. It's the experience, it's the pricing, it's the value it creates. Even more expensive or more important than price is value. Like, what is the value this brand delivers to me? And there are different segments of the market. Like, while people are still buying, inexpensive cars, other people are buying, Mercedes Benz or Audis. So understand your segment and what is important to that segment and deliver an exceptional customer experience.
I love that. I'm gonna have to get you to write that quote down later because like that's a tweet. Or can you tweet that out so I can retweet it? Because I really
I
love
will
that.
tweet it out, Graeme. Loyalty is the absence of a better value alternative. Now, Graeme,
I love
I'm
it.
going to turn the tables on you here a bit. And I want to
Okay.
say for the next case study, I want your insights to begin with for it, and then I'll riff off it. So,
Sure.
the next case study, we're going to be looking at optimization. So, what do you get out of this one?
I think that if you think about that onion we were just talking about, and you think about all of the different types of data and all the different areas in which that data is coming from, and all of the different systems that come into it, these sort of systems of systems and super systems. The big problem used to be that they were all siloed, right? Nothing was talking to each other. You'd have, whether it was silos within a company or silos within the system or silos with partners or silos in the supply chain, especially supply chain. And so we would have these sort of huge bottlenecks, almost like traffic jams of data. And I think that optimization and helping again these automotive companies to be more resilient and sustainable is all around breaking down these silos and giving them the ability to really understand, not just understand the data, but understand like why it's important. What can they do with it? Why does it matter? Where are they taking it? Right. So ecosystems are definitely the onion. And if you don't cut them right, they're going to make you cry. But all right, that's a bad pun. But I
No,
think
I like
really,
it.
but it's around resilience and sustainability. So that to me is the most important thing, is how do we not just use the data to deliver a better customer experience, but how do we do it to be a better business? How do we do it to better understand our impact on the environment? So I think that the silos, we used to look at them from a standpoint of development and sort of revenue generation, right? There were sort of these two things, like we need to use the data to really understand our customers and drive more revenue. Still important, definitely anybody that listens to this will agree. But there's this other notion of how do we build a stronger, more resilient business. Like an example of that would be around, you were talking about maintenance earlier. So what happens if you have somebody who's worked for your company for decades and they retain this enormous amount of maintenance knowledge and then they retire? What are you going to do? So there has to be this ability to kind of have these systems and software and solutions that under, like you were saying about, they can listen, they can pay attention. We have sensor data that listens to the machine and knows if it's vibrating incorrectly. So there's the resilience, and then there's the sustainability, right? And really being able to have a better impact on the world. And that's the stuff where it really gets my attention. And we'll talk about the Mayflower in a minute, but Jim, give me your 90
So,
seconds on ecosystems.
so if you think of, you were talking about the silos, Graeme, and if you think
Yeah,
about inside companies, the silos don't always communicate with each other appropriately or enough
sure.
or in
At
ways
all.
that are material or at all. Yeah.
At all.
So if inside organizations, we're all supposedly on the same team, we're not doing that. Think about the supply chain now, right? you know, are our suppliers considered to be partners and working inside our company, or are they outside our company? And so, really, how do we get an integrated enterprise? How do we interoperate between different companies in the supply chain when we don't even interoperate properly within our silos? So,
Yeah.
how can technology help do that? How can technology make the process seamless? Because imagine that's the way our bodies work, right? The heart didn't communicate with the brain, or the brain didn't communicate with the bladder. That would be really problematic. I mean, the
Sometimes I don't
bladder
think
is
my
very
brain is
important.
communicating with anything.
So, really, it's about how do we get to the real
Yeah.
time enterprise?
I don't think I'm going to refer to myself as a human or a person anymore. I'm going to refer to myself as an integrated enterprise, a biological business, if you will,
There
a
you go.
supply chain. Well, but I think that that's really great. And I think the key point here, folks, is ask those questions, right? You just use the word like how and why multiple times. So when you're looking at that integrated enterprise, or you're looking at that, um, the ability to really be sustainable, how are you doing that? Why are you doing it? And the why should not always be because it's cheaper, faster, better, right? The why should be because we're building a better, stronger, more resilient, more sustainable ecosystem, business, planet. We're a community. We there's got to be a little bit of reciprocity in there as well. So that's a really interesting point. We'll
I,
share
I
some case studies around that.
I just want to give you one example,
Yeah.
two examples actually, Graeme, just quickly about why we need to move to the real-time enterprise. So imagine I took a antibiotic this morning that had a bizarre side effect, a
Okay.
15-second muscular delay. So from the moment my mind says, hey, move your hand, until the message gets to my hand and I move it, is a 15-second delay. Okay. How effective a driver would I be on the highway? Some people might say, well, given that people are drinking coffee while driving and eating, at the same time, maybe you'd be about average. But would I live to tell the tale? So we know that a 15-second delay is completely unacceptable in our bodies.
Sure.
Now, how do organizations work? Financial reporting once a quarter, you know, annual employee appraisals, if you're lucky. You know, we have so many lagging systems. How do we move to the real time enterprise? How can IT tech help us move to the real time enterprise? The second example I want to give you, Graeme, is think back to when you were in school, okay? High school, college, university, whatever. And
Sure.
imagine that you didn't get any tests back with marks. You didn't get any essays back. And at the end of the year, they didn't even break out your marks by subject. They just gave you one collective mark for the whole year, like, 74.6. Like, how useful would that mark have been in terms of learning and improving? I wouldn't have known what tests I aced and which ones I failed. I wouldn't have known what worked in an essay and what didn't. Like, I would have no way of improving. So, an organization that doesn't have real time data on a very micro level, very granular level, is not an organization that's continually improving and learning. And so real time data is important for us personally as individuals and as teams and as departments and entire companies and as an ecosystem like a supply chain. We need
So
to
do you
have
know? Yeah.
real-time data on all these levels, which is where, edge, AI, 5G, and, big data all come in together.
So do you know what you need to know when you need to know it, or are you waiting to find out? Yeah, that's
And you might not find out till next quarter.
and you
And
might
by
not find out
then,
for a
the,
while.
the, the lesson is lost, right?
Yes.
Like, so on Wednesday, November 16th, something went wrong. I have no idea what that was, and I can't learn from it. We need the data in real time. And this is something that's called the Prius effect. When you drive a Prius, you find out what your gas consumption is in real time, and it changes driving behavior. People who drive Priuses save about 5 to 15% of gas, because they see when I really tromp it, I'm burning a lot of gas. And when I gently accelerate, I'm not burning a lot of gas. In other words, the real time feedback provides a learning loop that changes behavior. It's called the
All right.
Prius effect.
The Prius effect. Now, we have done a terrible job sticking to the 90 seconds for each one of these subjects.
Okay, we
So
got to
we're
go.
going
We
to
got to.
we're gonna really speed it up here. We're gonna do a super lightning round. So I'm gonna give you 4 topics, and you're gonna give me like 10 seconds or 15 seconds on each one. And the beauty is, I'm not going to say a word. You ready? Here comes our first one. First one for the super lightning round, Jim, is heart-stopping wearables. Give me 15 seconds on the clock. Let's go.
Okay, it might be a little longer than 15, but I have sorry to start off that way. I have a really good friend. His name's Joe, and Joe used to faint. And all his friends said, Joe, he's Italian. Italians get emotional. Joe faints, whatever. And then one time he fainted in the hospital, and they slapped an ECG on him, and they found his heart had stopped. Now, all these years, thankfully, Joe's heart had been spontaneously restarting. Needless to say, Joe now has a pacemaker. But the point of this whole story is the Apple Watch now has an ECG embedded in it. So we're having increasingly wearable devices that have medical real-time data that can improve health outcomes. And if Joe had had an Apple Watch, 20 years ago, he would have known he needed a pacemaker back then, as opposed to leaving it to chance to wake up all those times.
Got it. So again, don't wait for the data. Find out what you need to know right now. If he had that on, he would have known. So great, example at the macro level and at that bigger level as well. Let's talk. I can actually see it on the screen behind you. Let's talk about the data that we need for the ocean we want, the Mayflower autonomous ship. Tell me a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, our oceans are in crisis. We have the garbage patch of plastics in the ocean. We have the decline of large fish species globally. And despite all our science, we've only deeply explored 20% of the world's oceans. So how can we get that deeper knowledge without having ships, with fossil fuels? And the Mayflower is very elegant, very beautiful. It's an AI captain ship. So there's no captain, there's no crew. It's powered by solar power, and it can travel around the world's oceans with basically what we've been talking about: edge computing and satellite connections and relaying data, so we deepen our understanding of the oceans and work to protect them for the future.
I love it. So read more about the Mayflower autonomous ship, folks, at mass400.com. It really is an incredible vessel, and it's packed with sensors and really interesting technology. And when it gets underway in the spring, you can actually follow its voyage, which will be really exciting. All right, 2 more topics to go here, Jim. Next one is philosophy of integration. Tell me about that.
So, Graeme, everything we've been talking about today, edge or IoT, 5G, AI, big data, these are all discrete, separate topics that are discussed at CES and other tech events and on Twitter. But really, we're seeing an integration of all these philosophies. More data is going to be created in the next 2 years than all human history combined. So how are we going to make sense of that data deluge? All these points of presence, all these sensors that are connected either in factories or with our smartphones are all throwing off data. An autonomous vehicle throws off terabytes of data. So how are we going to make sense of all this data? And the only way is by using AI. It's just absolutely impossible not to. So IoT or edge devices create the data. 5G transports the data, and it's AI that needs to make sense of this data. So it's the integration of all these IT philosophies that's ultimately adding value.
So AI really is a business necessity. I mean, because every business now it has an enormous amount of data, and so we need to make sure that AI is helping organizations make sense of that. And of course, we'll have some case studies on that. Last topic, Jim. Here we go. Disappearing tech. Tell me about things that disappear.
Woo! Graeme, where are you?
So where did he go?
So at CES this year, there's an example of somebody wearing a smartwatch that they just touch to their front door and it unlocks the front door. And so, what that is doing is disappearing the key that people used to have to the front door. And when somebody looks at this person's wrist, they just see a watch. They don't see, super compute like power that today's smartwatch has compared to the supercomputers of 25 years ago. There's that much power in your wristwatch. In fact, your smartwatch has more power than the first lunar landing module. A bit of a worry if you're an old astronaut. So, the huge supercomputers that used to fill rooms, I can now wear on my wrist. So it's disappearing. The tech is invisible and the key is invisible. And so ultimately, what is happening with tech, we started the top of the show talking about how weather data, big data, and data thrown off airplanes being analyzed using AI is reducing turbulence by 50%. Now, but if I'm a passenger on the plane, I don't even know that exists. In other words, the tech is invisible to the end users. So the question is, how do we use tech for good? How does tech become invisible and benefit us?
Ah, that's great. I love it. And you mentioned the lunar lander, and I've got my phone here with all the, but I've also got my Saturn V launch rocket right back there. So I know the example well. Folks, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. We went a little bit beyond, but we're having a lot of fun talking, and that's the way these conversations would work, whether we are virtual or in person at a conference like CES. So Jim, thank you for inviting me into your space and for having this discussion. Folks, make sure you ask those questions. How, why, what is happening with the environment and 5G edge ecosystems and experiences. And if you have any comments or you want to see any additional case studies, you can just tag either one of us, or you can follow Jim at Jim Harris on Twitter. You can follow at IBM, and you can follow me as well at Graeme Knows, although I'm nowhere near as important as Jim. So follow Jim. And I think that's it. So Jim, thank you very much. And I hope you have a great day, my friend. It was a wonderful, wonderful chat. I appreciate it. And to
Graeme,
the folks in
this
the
was so
studio
much fun.
Absolutely. And our producers who are behind the scene, we can go ahead and end the show. Thank you very much.